Hello and welcome once again to the Agon Institute of Sports Ministry. My name is Jonathan Detweiler and I'm here with Dr. Greg Linville, and it's a privilege to be with you again. Thank you for joining us. We are in the process of discovering the roots of muscular Christianity, moving now into the models of muscular Christianity so that we can understand our heritage as it relates to our sports outreach movement that many of you are involved in. And so whether you're taking this for credit or for your own knowledge, we just really want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. It's really been an eye-opening experience for me just to be a part of these sessions as a moderator a little bit, and we hope that you're really growing and learning and applying what it is that you're learning about from the fathers of this movement. And so we've been looking at different historical figures, Thomas Arnold, George Williams. Last time was the Stud Brothers.
Stud Brothers. And
now we're moving into D.L. Moody. And you know, I have a particular interest in D.L. Moody because my grandfather, he graduated from Moody Bible Institute back in...
We'll talk about that.
Back in 1918, I think, so way back there. But I'm really looking forward to where we're going today. And so, Greg, I'll turn it over to you, and let's just get started.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. And we will talk about the Moody Bible Institute that came from D.L. Moody. And just to put this in perspective now, you're in a sports outreach models course. And so we're asking you to take notes. Those of you that are taking notes for your seminary degree, your Master's of Divinity, or some other kind of university degree, you need to take exam quality notes. Fill in the blanks of the PowerPoint presentation that you were given. And if you haven't gotten one of those, turn the tape off right now. Go find the PowerPoint that's supposed to go along with this instruction video. And then the main thing about the notes is, prayerfully as you hear this and you see these pictures and you grab hold of it, what is God saying to you about your model? From the models that we're looking at, what will be your model? On your first slide there, you'll see a number of other references that for more information about D.L. Moody. And for those of you that are in the quad groups, the quad reading groups for this course, you're all supposed to take a book, and some of these books would be the ones that you could take, that you would read and then report on to the other three folks that are in your quad. So that's why we give you some of this, and also to give you some insight into the fact that this is significantly researched and that we are presenting things that we have been thinking about for a long time. And personally, not only have I read the books, but I actually sat on D.L. Moody's chair at Northfield. I've done field research on all of these people. And Jonathan, D.L. Moody's chair, you and I both could sit in. I'm not going to say that he was heavy, but I will say that he was rotund. And if he had been about an inch taller, I think he would have been perfectly round. and Moody, and yet Moody was this incredible athletic person. We'll come to some of that. But on the second slide that you have there on your PowerPoint, you'll see a little bit about his growing up. This was his homestead where he lived. This is where he was born, this is where he lived, and this is where Northfield grew around from this old farm that he grew up. Now his father died very young, when he was a very young boy, and his mother was a very, very strong personality. He was the sixth of 6 children and was the 5th boy. And very small town, about 1,500 people there. And when Moody was 4, his father passes on. He claimed that he didn't know how to use the Bible until he was 17. The founder of the Moody Bible Institute did not know anything about the Bible. And he founded this university, and he had schools up at Northfield and Mount Hermon and other places, and he never had anything beyond a 5th grade education. Now just think about that for a second. Well, born into poverty, go into slide number 3 on your notes sheets there. He became a shoe salesman in Boston. He moves in 1854, so it's the middle of the 19th century. And while he moved there with an uncle, his uncle required him to go to church. He came across a Sunday school teacher by the name of Kimball. Edward Kimball came to the shoe store where Moody was working and asked Moody to pray to receive Christ. He did, April of 1855. But it seemed to have very little impact, other than maybe spurring a little bit of a general interest in religion. In fact, there was so little impact that a month later, the deacons at Mount Vernon Church denied Moody acceptance into the church. They said they weren't sure that he was actually a Christian. They said that he didn't even have a basic idea of what being a Christian meant. Now, we talk in another one of our courses about the theology of competition in sport. We talk about the theologies, and one of them being soteriology. Well, soteriology is the theology of salvation. Was Moody a Christian? I think probably so. But this is why we use the terminology evangelistic disciple making, because it's not enough just to raise your hand one day or kneel in a shoe store. There has to be something that goes on beyond that. It was not until a year later, 12 months later, almost to the day, that he went before the deacons again. And at this point, he showed a little bit more understanding, and obviously he had been living more, and they said that he showed sincerity and earnest determination to be a Christian. And I think that's a lot different, Jonathan, than somebody raising their hand.
Absolutely.
That for a whole year, they've shown sincerity and earnest determination. Hopefully God is working on all who are watching this to develop their models based on this theology. Well, Kimball gave Moody his appreciation for Sunday school, and let's not forget that, and for reaching youth, because that's going to come back into this story. Well, then he moves in September of that same year that he was accepted into the church. He moves to Chicago, and he's still working in the shoe industry. At this point, this burgeoning city needed an honest workforce, and he went there and was able to sell shoes because all these workers are coming there and needing that. Well, Moody had a knack for making and associating with money. We can't be scared of a model of being able to associate with money to be a ministry. This was one of his keys. Now, he joined the YMCA. And by the way, the picture you see is the Moody Bible Church that was founded years later then, in Chicago. He joins the YMCA over the year of 57 and 58 with the weekly prayer meetings that were had there. And in March of 1858, this YMCA, quote, was founded to be, quote, a common place to invite the idle, men of the city, where they may pass their time pleasantly and profitably, and thus be brought under religious influence. So you see the YMCA's philosophy that was born out of their theology. Their theology was that they needed to win people, and they needed to have this long-term discipleship mentality. And to attract them, philosophically, they wanted to found this Y where people could come, young men could come, and really have some good times and be brought under the religious influence. That soteriology would say that this needs to get into a relationship. So, this YMCA served two purposes. Coming together, all these members of all these various churches, eliminating competition in evangelism, and eliminating all local churches from fighting each other. They all came together, and it served as a clearinghouse for new methods. Mm-hmm. And so this model that Moody got in the YMCA was foundational.
Greg, isn't it true that they weren't just doing sports?
No, they were not doing...
Because today, in our day and age, we see the YMCA and we think sports. But I think it's important for people to know that it was a broader vision that was involved in meeting the felt need of the people, and that was how the sports came about originally.
And in fact, today the YMCA around the world is known for different things. Right. In America, it's known for physical fitness today.
Exactly, yeah.
Some sports. Other places it's known for education. Other places it's known for religion still. So, yes, you're exactly right. At this particular time, the YMCA had not necessarily started what they called their physical departments, their mm-hmm. physical fitness and sports. That comes later with Ross McBurney. We'll talk about him as well. Yes, there's many more people to introduce you to. Okay, but remember now, Moody was won by a Sunday school teacher, a Sabbath day teacher, a Sabbath day school teacher. So in 1859, he began to go out and do his own Sabbath day school. He left the church Sabbath day school because he felt like there was some things that were too restrictive. Now, churches have never been known to be restrictive, have they? Mm-hmm. I mean, churches have never been known to say, but we've always done it this way. Why are you trying to do it that way? And Moody was saying, these are street urchins. I mean, look at this picture, if you will. He's there in the middle with the beard, the shorter man. And these are the street urchins that he was enticing these young ragamuffins with missionary sugar, candies. And when the street urchins would see Moody walking down the street, he would have his pockets full of candy. Now, kids had no candy back then. And you could say he was bribing them, but you know what? He was really just trying to let them know that he cared. And he never let the naysayers stand in his way, that his methods weren't going to work. He went out and did it. If you have a model, don't let the naysayers say no. If God is saying yes, now, that's the key part, isn't it? Mm-hmm. God has to be saying yes to your model. Well, this was proven that Moody's ways were working. In fact, there were times at which he would simply barge into the homes in his pursuit of the kids, and stated that his barging into the homes, he might be shot today, but this actually helped him to know the parents. And he was usually well received by these working parents for his zeal and self-sacrifice. They knew that he was giving up lots for their kids. And because he was working inner city streets, and because he was working with these people that were poverty-stricken and down on their luck and trying to make the best they could, he won the admiration of the business people. He won the admiration of those who demonstrated the same drive that they had. They both thought and acted alike. Get better, work hard. In other words, Moody and the business people. Work hard, get better, work hard. And I'll embarrass you a little bit, Jonathan, but you've been to over 70 countries, and you put yourself in some places that a lot of people wouldn't go because there might be danger. And that's what people want to do, to rally around you. And people, we need a lot more people that want to do local church and other sports ministries in urban communities. They also, we just lost the lights, Jonathan.
There we go.
Hey, you know, we're in a third world country as we speak, and the lights
just as you say, maybe we're somewhere that
they just go out. Sorry about that. Some sort of timer, or I don't know what happened. Okay, so go to the inner city. Go to these places. Moody sets this model for us, trying to meet the perceived need. Remember the YMCA, George Williams, from a couple sessions ago. Meet the perceived need so that you can meet the real need, the spiritual need.
And Greg, what I also take from that is that he was in with the people.
He was in with the people.
He was walking the streets. He was interacting with them, and that's a great example.
Let's go a little bit more in his YMCA work. He said that he owed the YMCA for all that he became. That the YMCA provided for him the training and the equipping and all that he needed to go and do all that he did. Now, he was known as one of the greatest revivalists, one of the greatest people bringing people to Christ ever in all of history. And he says that it is a YMCA that formed that. Today, some groups like Young Life, some groups that are in the sports ministry world, we hope that CSRM and Uttermost and Uncharted Waters are doing the same thing today, that people will look back and say, what the training we received is what helped me go on. He stated that the Y prepared him for Christian work more than any other thing. Now, he, obviously, fifth grade education was drawn to books. And smart men that he said were his models. James Findlay, Findlay, one of the references on your first sheet there. This is some of the things that he said. I'm just going to read a couple of these things, Jonathan. He said, he didn't immediately grasp its spiritual purposes. It blended business and commercial society with its goals in Boston. Now, that's the YMCA. It was designed to reach evangelically raised youth who had moved to the city. Now, while he believed in the Y, he believed that there were many ways to reach boys and men. Now, this begins to take it in a direction. Here's the quote from him. I would recommend a gymnasium, classes, medical lectures, social receptions, music, and all unobjectionable agencies. Now, we find that from Jack Higgs, that quote, in his book, again on your first page. But he was saying, use whatever. Here's a couple other things Findlay and others are saying. Use indirect means to gain the attention, the direct attention of young men, to keep them from falling into the allures of the cities. Take them by the hand to a wholesome boarding house. Remember the Y house people. Bring them to the rooms of the Y. Introduce them to a church and a Sabbath school. In every way, throw around him good influences. Communicate that noble and Christian spirit's care for his soul. Over half of the 1,000 members of the YMCA in Boston were from outside Boston. And then the rest were from Boston. He broke with the Y that he believed the way to create character in men came not from acculturation, nor from recapitulation. When we come to Luther or Gulick, you'll understand that, but rather from regeneration. He did not believe that physical exercise would lead to godliness automatically. Remember, Arnold and others thought, just get young men involved and they'll become virtuous or become Christian. He said, no, this brings them under the influence. Use it for teachable moments, for ministry moments, but it takes regeneration, new life in Christ. Now, continuing on, any successful ministry, this would be page 7, needs to be able to A, raise up money, and B, raise up leaders. So, he raised a lot of money through Farwell. And Farwell was the man who gave him a whole lot of money to build the buildings and to train the leadership. Now, let's keep in mind here, Moody first established his own credibility because he sacrificed everything for urban kids. He risked his life, he risked his financial future, all of that. And then, because he had established credibility, he enlisted many other people to join him, the ministry. Some went and did street work with him. Some did fundraising for him. Some did organizing. He was a terrible organizer. He did the vision casting and a motivation. Model for leadership. Are you going to do the work of 10 men? Or are you going to train and equip 10 men to do the work? Or women? Now, this Farwell Hall that you see the picture of actually burned twice to the ground. Kind of indicating to Moody that, you know what, maybe I'm not supposed to build a building that has 5,000 seats in it and just bring people in to get preached at. And people were tired of raising money for the same building that burns down all the time. And so he left and went back to Massachusetts. But he did leave trained leadership in charge, and that Chicago Y went and really made some things happen. The next thing I'm going to tell you about him was that he adapted when there were social things going on, right in the middle of the Civil War. And so now there's this huge war work, this widening base, a new opportunity. He said, what better place to be than people who are going to be dead in another day? Go and win these people. And so he was moved to go reach these potentially dead and dying soldiers before they met their maker. And the war provided another and much deeper chance for his credibility. And now it's going beyond just Chicago and Boston. Well, now he becomes this evangelist, this revivalist. And he believed that evangelism by revival was the most effective at that time. Well, Farwell Hall burns. Each time it gets a little smaller. He has to kind of leave out from there. Here's a picture of one of his revivals. And he comes upon a guy born not too far, about maybe an hour's drive from where you and I sit today, in just over the border from Bessemer, Pennsylvania. Where he was born was in Ohio, but there's no little town where he was born. Nearest town was Bessemer, Pennsylvania. And he actually kind of then grew up, this man, Ira Sankey, in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. And now Moody begins to work with Sankey, and music becomes this incredible part of revivalism. Music and sport, right?
Sure.
You can combine your sport. In fact, again, this is what our buddy Tim Conrad has done. He's got Nashville quality music that's part of his sports camps for kids. Don't forget, it's not just sport all the time. They, in fact, did such great work at doing music that they sold $1.25 million worth of royalties to their music to help fund their other ministries.
That's a lot of money back then.
Entrepreneurship. You want to be good in ministry? There's got to be money. It's okay to produce products that people need to help fund your ministries. And as we said last time with the Studs, he began to be part of that North Atlantic corridor where these people went back and forth. All right, so you've got this music model, you've got this entrepreneurial model, you've got this revivalist model. There's all kinds of things that he can be a model for us, and we're really just touching the high points. We could talk for days. Whole courses are taught about Moody. But he leaves Chicago, he leaves the Y, and he goes back to Northville. He comes home and begins to build a base. He went home somewhat to take care of mom and siblings, always taking care of family. He acquired the land and he began to build buildings. He establishes these international relationships, which give him, again, further credibility. As you do a model, seek a model in your local church or your ministry, having an international part of it can be an incredible help to your credibility as people begin to see how you can work internationally. And you're going to also learn things. You will be better for having been involved in multicultural situations. It gives him relationships. It gave him a renewed vision to reach the college age that we talked about last time. And it renewed a particular part of that college ministry. And here's a key point, Jonathan. Here's a man who was preaching to thousands, hundreds of thousands in revivalism. But he came back from his times in England because of Kynaston Stud and began to focus once again on one-on-one evangelistic disciple making. He came back and said, how important is that? And so Northfield and beyond begins this new kind of time. As you turn to page 12, that he left for England and Scotland, and then he returned an international figure. And I will tell you also that when he went there, he didn't go for a week. He went for, I think, about 18 months. And he took his family with him, and he was very, very supportive of all that went on there. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. The UK, our brothers and sisters in the UK, are a little more reserved than we are in America. We are more reserved than many of our African brothers and sisters, or maybe our South American brothers and sisters. I mean, every culture has its own kind of water level. And Moody's revivalism was a little bit over the top for England. They didn't rush to his ministries, but eventually embraced it. And I just said 18 months, he was actually there for 2 years. And a growing acceptance amongst the aristocracy, as well as among the common person. And when he would go and do these revivals in these cities, the money would come in. He took the money and reinvested it in those communities. That's part of what sold people on him. He wasn't building a financial empire. If you're out to build a financial empire, if that's part of your model, you're in trouble. I'm just going to be honest with you. You're in trouble. The money that was left over after all the expenses were paid went to build YMCAs in all the cities that he worked in. And that continued the influence. All right, so now you can see that United Kingdom, the stud influence we talked about last time. I'm not going to revisit that, just as a review to know that he was definitely impacted by kind of Aston Stud, and this is what began now to drive this North Atlantic corridor as you turn to your 15th slide. And you see a picture here of Brian Mason. This was what was then called the Triumvirate, the CSRM Triumvirate. And there we are in England at a abbey there, and Brian and Steve Quattro and I were envisioning a lot of what it meant to collaborate just like Moody did. We started to think about what would that mean. And as many of you know, the rest is history, that there's been so much coming and going between England and America in the last 20, 25 years as a result of men like Brian Mason, who continues to call people to Jesus in England. And if you haven't heard about Higher Sports that he founded, I would really recommend that you find that model for yourselves. So he found Henry Drummond, the great Scottish minister, brought him, and let's turn now to his educator side, page 16. He opened up schools, and you see on the left-hand side the Northfield School, and you also see, and the Northfield School today is for girls, by the way. Well, it's actually co-ed today. It was founded originally for girls, and then across the Connecticut River is where he put the boys. Imagine that.
Separated by a river.
Yeah, over at Mount Hermon. And what's really phenomenal about this, Jonathan, that goes right past us today, is that girls didn't get educated back then. I mean, they did not get educated. But because of his gospel-centered approach, he knew that women needed to be educated. He starts a school for girls. This is just unheard of. And I want us to catch this about what he was part of. So the Northfield conferences come then to this place of his roots, of where he was born and raised. Let me just tell you about the Northfield conferences. It wasn't a week, it was all summer. And college students from around the country in North America and even across the ocean would come and spend the summer learning how to go and do missions. Again, a student voluntary mission. This is where these people would go to. And the all to go and go to all, win the world for Christ in our generation. These kinds of things, and they were impressed upon them. They heard from Ober, from Wishart, from the Studs, from Drummond. This is like a who's who of that day and age. And so you see on page 17 then the picture of Mount Hermon, which was for boys. So these educational schools start. And then if you turn to page 18, you're going to see the Moody Bible Institute. It started in a horse and buggy drawn wagon. You have a picture there. Now, he didn't have as much to do with Moody as he did with the schools in Massachusetts, but he certainly did have an influence. And his influence was Bible, 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 Bible. And that's why it's called Moody Bible Institute. And they have been training sports ministers for the last decade or so. But meeting the perceived need, pictures here of campouts, camping ministries. Now, I've waited till now to tell you this story. As you look there, how are these guys dressed? Suits and ties, camping. That's how they were at the Northfield conferences. Moody, influenced by Kynaston Stud and CT Stud, he began his own personal sports ministry. This is what he would do. He would challenge any of these college students. Now, this is a man now, well into middle age. He would challenge these college students to a foot race. I already told you this chair was as wide as these two chairs put together. Mm-hmm. A rotund little figure, and they would say, "Yeah, old man, what do you got? I'll bet whoever loses has to buy the ice cream cone." It's not that ancient. They did have ice cream. "You buy if I win. I buy if you win." "Old man, you're on." He said, "Just a second." He goes into his office, he comes back out, and he has a box of books. And he hands it to the young man. And he says, "What's this for?" He says, "If I have to carry this, you have to carry that. It makes it equal."
He had a plan.
He had a plan. And he's running in a suit. He beat most of those young men. I don't know what I could do with a box full of books, but he did meet them. But you know what? He did end up buying ice cream for them. Meeting the perceived need. These student conferences, you see page 20. Look at all those school names that today would have nothing to do with Christianity. They're working against Christianity. But he started with a couple of weeks, and then hundreds and hundreds of college-age men would show up. And this went on for decades and decades and decades. And they would be there for the whole summer. Okay, let's go back then to review a couple things. You see now on 21, on page 21, this meeting of the perceived need. This is what he eventually came back to. This world-renowned revivalist, the perceived need. He came back to those principles that he learned in a YMCA. Work with young men. Work with children through athletics and manly pursuits. Jonathan, he was a forerunner in many of these things. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to also begin on what I call a series that Clint Eastwood did a movie for us on. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Mm-hmm. Moody was definitely the good. In terms of family, he was absolutely adored by his kids and grandkids. You see his burial site where he and Mrs. Moody were buried there up on the top of Northfield. And I would encourage anybody that's traveling through New England to try to go to Northfield and just sit up on this bluff. And from there, you can see the Connecticut River Valley. And you can see the foothills of the White and the Green Mountains, depending on which side of that Connecticut River the mountains are on. It's this idyllic place where Moody would go and pray for the world. And to be able to sit, as I did for an afternoon by his gravesite, and contemplate and think through what he meant is a moment that's riveted in my mind of my life, where a lot of this time today began to become formalized for me. Family for him is where he ended as well. And that's part of what Northfield meant to him. He sought to spend quality and quantitative time with them. And Jonathan, a little known fact for a lot of people about you is that you have based your life to be in close proximity to your daughters. It means the world to me to know that you are making an effort to be with your daughters as much as is physically and humanly possible. That's going to come true for you in spades through the years. Because see, that's what Moody's kids and grandkids, they grew up loving him. And when he went to England for those 2 years, he didn't leave them behind. He took them. He engaged with them all the time. He always had someone in his buggy, it's horse and buggy days. He had somebody in his buggy whenever he went to town. He never went by himself. He wrote them letters. He lavished love on them via gifts and physical touch. He made sure that he was knowing the love languages before the love languages books were written. He figured out what it was and communicated. Now, I'll tell you that he loved to tour his land on that buggy, and he took the kids and grandkids out, scared his kids to death how fast he drove the buggy, and in fact, some of his kids refused to let their children, Moody's grandchildren, ride with him in the buggy because the buggy was often up on 2 wheels going around these corners. But you get a sense of how much they loved him, and his vibrancy of life came out. This is this man that we're talking about. Let's deal with some models from Moody to wrap it up. Work hard. He was no slacker. No matter what he did, he worked immensely hard at it. How are you? Aspiring sports minister? Do you punch the clock? Credibility, second model. He was not afraid of poverty. He was not afraid of war. He went into those Civil War battlefields. I mean, he went on the battlefields. He was not afraid of international travel. He was not afraid to tackle anything that would give not him, but the ministry credibility. Leadership. He identified it. He identified leadership, and he shared the vision with them, including sharing with them the potential he saw in them for ministry. Now, Jonathan, we're videoing here in the World Outreach Center, and it's the home of CSRM and also of the eastern region of the Evangelical Friends. And in that tradition, they say that only God ordains, the Evangelical Friends say only God ordains, but mankind records that ordination. So there's no ordained ministers within the Evangelical Friends, except by God. They are recorded by humankind. This is what Moody understood. And he would tap people on the shoulder. I remember a few years ago saying to you, Jonathan, I see God's ordination in your life. And I said, would CSRM ever be in your future? And here it is now, a few years later. And this is the way Moody went about it. He saw God's ordaining hands on people. And he said, come into ministry. And then he developed them. He took business people. He took homemakers. He took war generals. He took all these musicians. He took people who had already been called to ministry, but changed their view of ministry. He gave them this vision. How are you doing, sports ministry? How about those coaches in your league at your church? How about those league directors in your church? How about that athlete who sits in your chapel? How about the person who's on your board that is giving your finance? But has God ordained them? Are you tapping them on the shoulder? Do you have what we have in CSRM, your laborers list? Remember the Y had their Andrew list? Who do we bring to Christ? They also had a laborers list. Matthew 9:38, the harvest is ripe. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would send out laborers for the harvest. This is what he would do. He gave them then responsibilities. He delegated to them. You've got to let people go do their job. You have to give them the tools and the support, but they have to do it. But he was always there to support them. Finance is another model from Moody. Wherever he went, he always recognized God's plan to finance the ministry. Sometimes through people, sometimes through those entrepreneurial things that we talked about, the hymn books that he and Sankey produced. He always realized that through their giving, God would grow them. And one of the things I know I fall in this all the time, that I forget what giving is going to do to the person who's giving. And I'm embarrassed or I'm ashamed to ask them for money. I rob that person of a blessing so many times because what God will do. And finally, a model at home. Ministry did not mean separation, but rather a new place for the family to live for a while. Marriage and childbearing were the highest priority. Build your ministry upon the power base of your home. And in fact, how you raise your children, how you treat your spouse will be sometimes your biggest witness long term. How we doing, sports ministers? How's your model? What models have you learned from this? Jonathan?
Yeah, for me, I'm just really impressed by Moody and his life, and he epitomizes the type of leaders that we need today. You know, men who are committed at so many levels to the calling and the passion that God has placed on their lives. And
maybe not so rotund, but yes.
He was still an athlete,
yes,
even in the midst of that size. But, you know, it's great to be reminded of these things from his life. And as you say, we can learn from his examples, and we can take these things, and not that you have to be exactly like Moody or to aspire exactly for the things that he did, but I think what's important is that you take some of these principles that Greg has just articulated, and you say, okay, God, what is it that you have for me that you want me to take from this session, from Moody's life, and what is it that you want me to apply? So pick one or two things and focus on those and do those things well.
Absolutely.
And take the rest and kind of put them in your back pocket and keep them in mind. But take one or two ideas or principles and just really begin to commit those to God and pray over them. And so, yeah, this has been a great session, Greg. Thank you for sharing. It's really great to look back. You know, sometimes in classes like this, you can get overwhelmed by the academic side. Well, what we really want you to do is to make this practical, to make it your own, and apply it to your life and to your ministry. And so we hope that you're doing that. So thank you for joining us. Next session is going to be on Billy Sunday.
Billy Sunday.
Who was a baseball player.
He was a phenomenal baseball player.
And then, yeah, other things happened in his life, and we're going to learn about that, him and how his model can impact us.
That's right.
So thanks again for joining. This is the Agon Institute of Sports Ministry. I'm Jonathan Detweiler. Dr. Greg Linville. Have a great day. Bless you.